So Emilia Perez has been getting a lot of buzz at the Oscars this year. And everyone is just jumping for joy and loving every second of it. And I don't think I've ever seen this much buzz around an Oscars contender before, because people are just loving this film. And nobody is in disagreement about this timeless classic, because it is widely considered to be a modern masterpiece by every single person on this planet. So there's a film that came out this year called Emilia Perez that got about 57 Oscar nominations this year, and people aren't very happy about it. Funnily enough, I think I was in the boat with pretty much everyone else in terms of not even knowing this movie existed until that fateful day when nominees to be determined. So naturally, I was pretty curious as to what this movie even was and why the Oscars voters were treating it as if Stanley Kubrick had just had his grave struck by lightning as he came back from the dead to direct his final masterpiece, Emilia Perez. So I texted my parents for the first time that month about the Netflix login, watched the movie, and oh my. I don't know if you could make a more unfocused, a less subtle, a more tonally just all over the place film if you really, really tried to. Like, one great example of how the movie is incredibly out of focus is the first 20 or so minutes when you're introduced to the main character, played by Zoe Saldana, and she is a lawyer who is shown to be working with this client that is pretty obviously guilty, and she has to defend him, but she's such a good lawyer that she's able to do it anyways. So they kind of build that up a little bit. Kind of seen that before, but it's at least something that they were building, and something that I kind of wanted to see how they would deal with that later on in the movie. But then the movie swerves the car so intensely that it causes me to grab one of those little handles that are on the roof of the car. The main character gets an anonymous call telling her, that person was guilty, you shouldn't have had to defend them, meet us outside, we'll discuss this. And I'm like, oh, okay, this is an interesting direction. So she meets outside, gets kidnapped, and she gets brought to a cartel leader. And naturally, the main character is pretty confused because she's like, oh, what do you want with me? Why have you brought me all the way out here? To which the cartel leader responds, I want to be a woman, and I want to do the transition surgery. And then even the main character is like, I'm a lawyer, right? I'm not a surgeon. To which then she replies with, I want you to find a surgeon in order to do this procedure for me. Which makes absolutely no sense in the context of the film, because the main character is just this random lawyer who has no connections to the cartel whatsoever, and is literally just a really bad excuse to further the plot along. But then after this whole sequence is over, the film then just sprawls into so many different avenues all at once, to where it starts talking about cartel violence in Mexico, the transgender experience, and even the corruption of politicians. And none of these concepts are really given enough time to properly flesh them out in a way where they comfortably fit within the overall narrative. But at the same time, it's really hard to take any of it seriously when Emilia Perez takes place in a cartoon fantasy land that is completely detached from reality, while simultaneously trying to deconstruct sensitive topics straight from reality. The movie is also a musical, funnily enough, which definitely contributes to the whole thing feeling kind of hard to take seriously sometimes. Like, Selena Gomez is in the movie, and there's this one song that she sings where she just starts singing these random words in a super gravelly, threatening voice, and it sounds so goofy. Selena Gomez is also speaking Spanish for pretty much the entire film, and she genuinely sounds like she's trying to order a Polo Frito at some points. Now, I will say, I do think that the conversation around Emilia Perez has kind of become a little toxic in some places. Like, not only are some people just getting absolutely lambasted for saying that they like this film, but it also kind of feels like sometimes whenever people are talking about how they don't like the film, they either just talk about something that is completely detached and outside of the film itself, or they just list off the cliched responses that pretty much everyone else is doing, where they quote that one lyric. And I will say, there definitely are some aspects of the film that I do enjoy. Like, I think the camera work and the actual choreography within the musical scenes are actually pretty well done, and they're very coordinated in how they were pulled off in this film. One that particularly sticks out to me is actually that one scene with that lyric that everyone's clowning on, where they show these overhead shots of the entire set, and they have all these actors doing these really meticulous dances with gurneys and like different props and stuff, and it looks really good. But then again, I definitely don't think this movie is deserving of pretty much any Oscar that it was nominated for. Much like how the 2004 classic that everyone so fondly remembers and completely understands the Oscar Best Picture win of, Crash. Crash is a film set in LA about an ensemble cast of different characters, including a Brentwood housewife, her district attorney husband, a Persian shopkeeper, 2 cops, and a pair of carjackers. And it bounces back and forth, Pulp Fiction style, between all of their different perspectives as they all kind of intermingle in their own stories and everything. And it's a film about racism.
Yo, Osama, plan the jihad on your own time. What do you want?
Yeah, Emilia Perez's Fantasyland apparently has really good rates for filmmakers to shoot there, because Crash is also set in the same place with the exact same cartoon characters, which leads to some unintentionally hilarious moments. For instance, in the first scene where we are introduced to the carjacking characters, we see them walking down the street as they're talking to each other, and they see a woman cling closer to her husband whenever she sees them walking down the street, to which they start talking about like, oh, she got real colder whenever she saw us walking down the street. And then...
Do we look threatening? No. Fact, if anybody should be scared around here, it's us. We the only 2 black faces surrounded by a sea of over-caffeinated white people patrolled by the trigger-happy LAPD. So you tell me, why aren't we scared?
Because we got guns?
You could be right.
Like this is what I'm talking about. It feels like nobody in these movies acts like real people. Like, take Do the Right Thing, for example. That movie understands the dynamics between the different characters as well as the way they would act during the plot of the movie so incredibly well, to the point where it feels so down to earth and actually has something interesting to say about its subject matter. Whereas this, on the other hand, has nothing to say other than the most basic and obvious possible things you could say within a film. Like, for instance, there's this one character played by Michael Pena, and he is working on changing and fixing the locks for the wife and husband character that were in the earlier scene. And the wife is incredibly racist, to the point where she is talking about how she wants the locks changed again in the morning, so that the Mexican dude with tattoos doesn't take a key to all of his gang friends. And this is all within earshot of this guy as well. But then the movie takes this incredibly over-the-top scene and then transitions to this next scene where Michael Pena is talking to his daughter and trying to comfort her while she's under the bed, scared of hearing gunshots in the distance. And it's just so incredibly obvious what the film is trying to do, of just being like, oh, look, he's not a gang member. He's an actual human being, too. Well, isn't this incredibly racist, over-the-top lady incorrect in her assumptions? And it honestly doesn't help that the film feels like it thinks it is actually poignant in some of the storytelling that's on display here. However, to put myself at risk of never being able to talk to any of my friends, family, or not a singular soul on the internet ever again, I will say, Crash is infinitely worse than Emilia Perez. While I had a few okay things to say about Emilia Perez, I cannot say the same about Crash. It is boringly shot, the acting is really stilted, and this is all on top of the really dumb characters and story that are just permeated all throughout the movie. So the fact that this film that's about as meaningful as a fortune cookie that you dumpster dove for managed to win Best Picture could possibly potentially have a chance of being indicative that the Oscars voters don't really care about the medium of filmmaking and kind of just vote based off of what a film represents. That's stupid. Oh, what am I talking about? There's no way. So yeah, that's just some of my thoughts on the Oscars situation happening at the moment. I honestly just thought it was interesting that there was a comparison being drawn between this year's Oscar darling and a previous year's Oscar darling. So I just kind of wanted to talk about that for a bit and hopefully not say anything that would have the YouTube comments up in arms with torches and pitchforks. Because if I said anything that made them angry, oh man, that would just be the end of me. I don't know if I would ever be able to emotionally, mentally, or even physically come back from that. Anyways, Emilia Perez is a 10 out of 10.